Welcome to Make Your Own Reality, the ultimate training for the Reality plugin for DAZ Studio. My name is Paolo Ciccone, I'm the author of Reality, and I'll be your guide in this tour. Reality was written to enable people to use the incredible power of LuxRender directly from DAZ Studio. These video tutorials are designed to help you create the most beautiful scenes with Reality in the shortest amount of time possible. Reality is an artist-oriented tool. It's designed with the goal of keeping simple things simple and making complex things possible with just a bit of work. Straight out of the box, with basic lighting, you can get absolutely gorgeous images. With a bit more, you can obtain effects that you never thought possible with a program like Studio. I can tell you the first simple ingredient of a great image: light. The key to creating beautiful images is good lighting, and here we will learn how to do it. For all the lessons in these tutorials, I'll be using DAZ Studio 3. The exact version is not important as the program gets updated often. I'm also using LuxRender 0.8 and Reality 1.25. In explaining software, I usually avoid giving a tour of the entire program at the beginning. There is no way, in my opinion, for people to remember all those menus and options, and it's just too incredibly boring. Instead, we will discover the features of Reality step by step, using options that we need as we progress from simple scenes to more sophisticated ones. Before you start using these tutorials, you should have Studio, Reality, and LuxRender installed and verified to work, as explained in the Reality User's Guide. I personalize Studio to use a series of shortcuts that you might find useful, so I'm going to spend a couple of minutes showing you how to create the same configuration. First of all, I like to keep the focus of my attention on the scene that I'm making. For this reason, I prefer to avoid shifting my point of view and searching for user interface elements whenever it's possible. One of the most common operations that we perform with any 3D application is to rotate or pan the camera. I prefer not to use the camera controls in this area because it's distracting and less immediate than moving the point of view directly from the viewport. So I customized the orbit and pan controls. Let's see how it's done. By pressing F3 or selecting Edit Customize, we get the customization dialog box. In the View Shortcuts area, there is a menu to change the default. We leave the selection to Orbit and then click on the field to the right while pressing the Alt key. On the Mac is the Option key. This will allow me to orbit the camera while I'm in the 3D view using Alt and dragging with the mouse. Next, I select Pan and press Alt, Shift, and click. This will pan the camera when using the Shift Alt and then dragging with the left click of the mouse. These are just very handy combinations that are easy to reach on the keyboard. If you use a Wacom tablet like I do, these combinations are really effective. Next is the selection of the manipulation tools. I often use the universal tool to move objects around, so I'd like to have an easy keystroke to switch to this tool, instead of a multi-key combination. There is really no need to have a multi-key combination since single-stroke keys are perfectly safe in Studio. So, I search for the Viewport Tools entry and expand it. Next to each tool, there is a keystroke that enables that tool. For example, the universal tool is normally activated by Alt-Shift-U. This is a two-hand key combination, way too convoluted. So, simply right-click on the keystroke field, select Change Keyboard Shortcut, and type the letter U. Now you can select the universal tool by simply typing U. As you can see, I have done the same for all the other tools that I use frequently. Lastly, let's see the keys for the viewport layout switch. I often need to split the viewport to show two different camera angles. Now, you can have that kind of split done vertically or horizontally. I use the horizontal split more often. It gives me two widescreen views stacked one on top of the other. So I assign the key number 2 to it. But if I need a vertical split with two views side by side, I can use the Shift-2 combination. And if I want to get back to a single large view, I select that by typing the number 1. All done. Now we don't have to get distracted by the UI just to switch the point of view or select the most common tools. I find this configuration to be more productive than the default one, but this is just my personal preference. Throughout this tutorial, you will see these keystrokes being used all the time. We are lucky. For more than a century, photographers and cinematographers, the people shooting motion pictures, have analyzed every aspect of artistic lighting. We can use all their expertise to work with our lights without having to rediscover how light works. Often, I read in the forum people saying that lighting is their weakest point. This is not surprising. Programs like Studio don't come with documentation that explains lighting. This is normal. When you buy a photo camera, it doesn't come with lighting instructions either. Similarly to using a camera, if you don't learn a little bit about lighting, it will be hard to create beautiful images. Lighting fixtures come in several types. A very useful fixture is the spotlight. Spots are often used in photography because they are easy to control. Light control, in fact, is the name of the game when it comes to artistic lighting, and spots are predictable. They shoot light only in one direction, and the light creates a cone of a given angle. In 3D applications, we can easily control the cone and make the light appear as a wide fan or a very narrow beam that pierces the night. A photographer's softbox is one of the most widely used light fixtures. This is because it creates a wonderful soft light that wraps around the subject and produces nice, soft shadows. If you open a softbox, you'll find that inside there is a light that is not much different from a spotlight. So the source of light itself is similar. But the softbox adds a screen to the fixture, and this screen and the material that is made of create a large light source. In other words, the size of the light is what determines the softness of the light. Dimming the light does not change the sharpness of the shadows. It might make them harder to see because the whole scene becomes dark, but that's all that it does. Let's do a simple experiment. Here is our subject, and here is our spotlight. Let's turn on the spotlight, and here is the result of the light. Notice the harsh light resulting in sharp shadows. The spot is a fairly small light. This spotlight has a bulb capable of 500 watts. Now, let's take the softbox, which is actually 1000 watts, twice the brightness of the spot, and place it at the same distance. Because the softbox is much larger, it will create a soft light. Here we can see that it does work in that way. The light is twice as bright as the spot, and it is at the same distance, yet the shadows are much softer. This effect can be brought to the extreme with an example from the real world. When a layer of clouds shields the sunlight, we have almost no shadows, even in the middle of the day. That is because the clouds turn the sun, a sharp light, into a gigantic softbox. If you want shadowless lights in reality, Make your mesh light huge. Motivation refers to the reason for a light to be appearing in a scene. An example of bad motivation would be to see a scene with some people in it, lit by a chandelier, and yet have the light coming from the floor. Don't laugh, I've seen it. Motivation should not be a strict law, but something that you keep in mind. A light doesn't have to be strictly motivated, but it should fit plausibly in the scene. Light is an artistic tool. A photographer is somebody who paints with light, and we need to think in the same way when using lux. Let's see this principle in action. Here is a portrait of Victoria IV. Very simple, nothing more than a hair and a pose. How we place the lights in the scene can completely change the mood of the resulting picture. This version shows a very diffuse light with almost no shadows and a pretty cold atmosphere. Here is exactly the same image, exactly the same scene, but with complete different lighting. The only thing that has changed is the lighting. No post-work has been done, and the materials have not been altered in any way. This is exactly the same scene. You can see in the first version that the lips look bluish purple, while in the second picture they are rich red. Light interacts with your materials and brings out different colors depending on what light you use. To do successful lighting, you have to ask yourself a couple of basic questions. A. What is the mood of the scene? And B. What is the most important light in the scene? In other words, you want to know where the light comes from and what role it will have. For example, with a portrait, you don't normally want light to come from below, unless you are going for a scary movie kind of effect. A standard portrait has to look flattering. Soft light is flattering, so you will be using one or more soft lights. Sunlight is way too harsh unless you filter it a bit. A mesh light positioned fairly high in relation to the subject will make a good first light. To make a portrait come to life, you want to create a sense of depth. This is achieved by the skillful placement of shadows. In fact, you should think of the first light that you place in the scene as the shadow generator. Once you start thinking in that way, instead of using light to flood the scene, you will immediately improve your lighting. Take a look at this iconic scene from The Godfather. If you exclude the light in the background, which doesn't do anything for the characters, Don Corleone and Bonasera are simply lit by a softbox above their heads, and the resulting shadows create a mood of quiet drama and intensity. Gordon Willis, the brilliant cinematographer who shot this movie, is known for his minimalistic approach, and he managed to give life to one of the most famous and visually striking movies of all times. So, here is a scene with V4 and some hair and the Arabic sky texture applied. Since we only render from the shoulders up, we can easily hide the lower part of the body. This helps with memory usage. Reality comes with a series of scripts to do this quickly. Okay, we can start working on the lighting. Let's look again in the Reality folder where we can find the mesh light. This is a studio plane which comes in named Reality Light. Reality will automatically turn any object for which the name starts with Reality Light into a light source, a mesh light. This prop is named correctly and is already positioned and rotated ready for a portrait. Let's add it to the scene. And now let's do a quick render. Once we position the first light, we can think about other elements of the shot. Is this enough, or do we want something else? If so, what is that? In this case, I'd like to have a bit more light on the left side of the face, just to make it a bit brighter, but just a hint of it. What should we use? Another mesh light? Maybe a spot? What about nothing? Here is the first tip about using lux. Light is reflected by objects like in real life. If we go back to our lighting example and use the one spot to light the side of the character, we can then use a white card to bounce light back to the character, but from the opposite side. Simple and effective. Let's do the same in Studio. We start adding a plane to the scene. To position object in the scene easily, I use the 2 camera view and I activate the option by pressing the number 2. So now I can use the perspective camera in the lower pane to position my plane while I see if it appears in the frame with the upper view. I'll switch to the universal tool for positioning by pressing the letter U. Let's position the plane on the other side of the subject, making sure that it's angled to reflect the light from the opposite side. This should look good. Let's do a test render. Voila! Works like a charm. So, in this lesson, you learned how to create a simple portrait with one single light and a bounce card. This shows both the effect of the mesh light and how to easily take advantage of Lux indirect lighting. This wraps it up for the first lesson. We'll continue looking at more lighting technique in lesson 2.